Hello, everybody. How is everybody doing today? Welcome to this week's online coaching webinar. Of course, this is your host, Tim Mai. I also have Stan Malden online with us today, and we have a very, very special guest on this on the line today as well. So today's a very special coaching call. Because of two reasons. Number one is because of the special guest we have on the line. I think he's officially, the first doctor that we have on the line on a webinar. and he's a psychologist. So that's when I was in middle school. That's what I wanted to grow up and become. So that's pretty cool. And then. The second thing that makes this webinar very special is because we're not going to talk about real estate today. Instead, we're going to talk about mindset, about getting you in your peak performance state so that way you'll be able to do deals after deals consistently. I teach a lot of people, and I do a lot of coaching, and Stan helped me do a lot of coaching, and we see it over and over and over again. The difference between the difference between the successful people, the ones that are out there doing a lot of deals, versus the ones that that are just struggling and nothing seems to work for them. The only difference between those two is how much crap they have in their head. So John's going to help us and help you flush out those negative stuff and position you. Position you in a peak performance state, so that way you'll be able to consistently perform well and consistently do deals. And so I'm really, really excited. Let me introduce you to John real quick. He is, like I said, he's a psychologist, and he's been a psychologist since 1992 now. So what is that? Almost 20 years.
Almost 20 years.
Wow. And so he has a lot of experience in helping, especially helping musicians to perform at their peak, and just helping a lot of people going through different challenges, helping them breaking through barriers, breaking through things that are holding them back, John has recently been introduced to me by Dave Crenshaw, who you guys might have heard on this call not too long ago, I'm not going to go through and I'll let John go through and talk about all the things he has done here. But from my conversation with John, we come from different backgrounds, but we share similar beliefs in what it takes to get what it takes to get a person I don't know what the word is. What it takes to get people, I guess, unstuck and change the misbeliefs or just help them straighten their mindset out. I'm not that great with with explaining this process. That's why I'm not teaching this, by the way.
That's okay.
So I'm trying to focus on teaching real estate. So, without further ado, let's welcome Dr. John Skidmore. All right, yay!
Hey, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Tim, what you're really describing, I like to refer to as the missing link. If we consider that each of us are performers, it doesn't matter what we do. If we're going out there to play on the piano, if we're going out there to do real estate, we are performing. And we learn a set of skills and a set of tasks and things that we need to do to be good at what we want to do, right? I don't know much about real estate. You do. But the reality is we need tools and skills to bridge the gap. It's really obvious in the world of the performing arts. For example, you have the practice room and you have the stage. You learn the stuff here, you got to produce it over here. there's really a missing link in the education of most of us, because it takes new tools and skills. It takes an additional set to carry us from the practice room to the stage. And that's what I really want to talk about today. You know, the title of this presentation is called The Power of Possibility. And it's interesting, as a psychologist, I didn't learn about possibility. I learned about illness, pathology. I learned about mental illness. And only as I've grown up myself, as I've had a chance to practice as a psychologist, I've begun to discover this whole concept of possibility. What does it mean to create a possibility? Now, I want to share with you a story that I'm really building this whole presentation around. And it starts with my son. I love being a parent, and my children have been just marvelous mentors to me in my life. And here I'm sitting at the kitchen table, so just picture this. My 13-year-old son opens the back door, comes in, has a big smile on his face, and very clearly, very profoundly, he says, "Dad, I want to build a trebuchet." Okay, now there we go. "Dad, I want to build a trebuchet." Now, immediately I was enrolled. I was like, cool, I want to do this. Well, he went on to explain to me how in one of his classes he was given the assignment to come up with a history project. They'd been doing some studies about Europe and the siege engines and what they did there with the trebuchets to bombard castles, and he thought it would just be really cool to build one. Well, as we talked about this, we began to go on the internet and see some YouTube clips. I watched one where this guy built one that launched a piano. This is a big trebuchet. We saw a NOVA presentation, and they talked about how they bombarded castles. We saw plans of Leonardo da Vinci and all these people that were designing these trebuchets, and we were just having a blast with these trebuchets. Well, it came to a Sunday afternoon. We were in the house, and we'd done enough research, and we said, let's start to build one. So we went into the garage. And what you're seeing on the screen is the actual trebuchet that we came out with. We built this. Now, this trebuchet was really an example of trial and error learning. For example, the first time we launched it, we discovered why they said put wheels on it. We didn't have wheels on it. All the torque just basically lifted this little frame up off the ground. Oh, that's why we need wheels on it. So we found some wheels. You can see we got really sophisticated in our technology here, broken screwdriver, you know. But that was our key. That was our lock mechanism. We just pull that away, and there it fires. We had to come up with some kind of sling. Duct tape became our tools here. We had a blast building this trebuchet. Now, we ended up launching apples and oranges. We launched marbles. We were launching stuff across the street. We spent the afternoon figuring out how to make it launch forward rather than backwards. We had a great time with this. Now, the next part of this, to me, is one of the most important pieces of this whole presentation. As we were kind of wrapping up for the day, I mentioned to my son, hey, we have your history project built. This is great. It's all done. And my son looked at me and said something very profound. Dad, I want to build a big trebuchet. Now, of course, when he said that, my mind flashed back to the one that I saw that launched a piano. That was a big trebuchet. Now, an interesting thing happened here. At this moment, I wasn't quite so enrolled. I mean, in my mind, we had a great afternoon. We've done our research. We have his project completed. And he wanted to build a trebuchet. And he wanted it to be a big trebuchet. And at that point, it was kind of like, okay, that's too big for me. I mean, he was all ready to go down to Home Depot and just buy all the materials. And at this point, I'm going, okay, I'm not so enrolled. Well, my son kept his dream and his vision about building a trebuchet alive. It didn't matter to me, or it didn't matter to him, that I wasn't enrolled. He kept inviting me to, Dad, when are we going to do this? Well, I told him to talk to a neighbor about getting some scrap materials. He was a contractor. Maybe Mitch could help us out. And periodically would have this conversation. Well, he kept talking to people in his world about his dream to create this big trebuchet. He talked to a neighbor down the street. He talked to some friends. As Christmas rolled around, much to everyone's surprise, we opened the door one morning, and on our porch were 14 2x4s with a bow on them. One of the girls he was flirting with in junior high, Dad happened to be a contractor, she gives him these 2x4s for Christmas. Well, as soon as we saw these 2x4s, it was like, hey, we're set. We can do this now. Let's use this as the basis of our materials, and we've got our stuff, and we can do this. Well, we did a little bit more designing and planning with the 2x4s, and as winter disappeared and spring came up, we found a Saturday. And we began to put this trebuchet together. Now, this trebuchet ended up being something that had a 12-foot base, so think 12 feet at the bottom. It was about 9 feet at the apex, had a 14-foot arm, had a 100-pound counterweight, and we were launching milk jugs across the street. Now, what's interesting about this, and we'll talk about this whole process, it did not work perfectly. For example, the first time we launched this, the galvanized pipe that we were using as the axle for the launch, or for the arm, it turned into a V. We had an immediate breakdown right there. Okay, so we went from a half-inch piece of pipe to a 3/4-inch piece of pipe with some rebar through it. Every step of the way was a building kind of experience. And I want to share with you what I call the 5 steps to turning a possibility into a reality. To each one of you, you are looking for possibilities. You see possibilities in the kinds of things that Tim is teaching you. You are looking to certain things. Well, I just want to go through this process as it relates to what my son did with his trebuchet, also as it relates to what you are doing. So as we look at this idea of what does it mean to see a possibility, see the possibility. See, my son could have done anything for a history project. There were countless possibilities. Now think about this question. If someone said to you, you know what, I've got a trip planned. We're going to do Mount Everest. We're going to leave in 3 months. Are you with us? Now, as you think about that question, some of you might go, not really. Mount Everest, that sounds kind of like dangerous, doesn't it?
Right.
Somebody else might go, you're going to Mount Everest? Count me in. So there's so many things that we could do as a possibility, and my son zeroed in on the trebuchet. That was what he saw possible for him. He said, hey, this is something I can do. So that sense of possibility is very powerful. The next step, though, really is to be able to not only recognize what you see as a possibility, but what are you going to declare? What are you going to choose? See, not only did he see the trebuchet as possible, when he walked through that door, he didn't say, Dad, you know, I've been thinking about all these different possibilities or possible projects. What do you think about building a trebuchet? He made it very clear, Dad, I want to build a trebuchet. Now at that moment, all the other choices or possibilities or options simply disappeared. And when he chose the trebuchet, that's something that he was going to do. I am doing this. This is my choice. Now, with that choice, his focus was clear, his energy was clear, and the next step really is to get into action. My son was in action. We started out looking, researching, just exploring different options. Okay, we made a prototype. I thought it was the real deal. Well, I backed away when he said he wanted to build a big trebuchet. He was still in action, enrolling other people to support him. So much so, this gift of 2x4s show up. And then at that point, we got back into action and we started to create things. Our actions were trying to build this. We really didn't start this out like an engineer would do by any means. This was really trial and error. I'm a psychologist, my son. It was interesting. For his high school physics project, we redesigned this trebuchet. And his high school physics class has a whole a day where they build trebuchets or they launch trebuchets. Well, ours really looked pretty much like we put it together one piece at a time and that we just made it all work. He ended up launching an 8-pound shot put, 192 feet, with this trebuchet that he built. I mean, it stood over 20 feet tall when the arm was in the air. It was huge. There was another trebuchet next to ours. All I could say was his dad's an engineer, and his dad designed that one. I mean, it was just precision personified. And it looked like a work of art. But we were in action making our trebuchet work, making this work for him. Now, when you're in action, you've got to expect things to break down. Well, let me back up here. I've got a quote here that I really like when talking about being in action. On the plains of hesitation bleached the bones of countless millions who, at the dawn of victory, sat down to wait, and waiting died. See, that's the danger of inaction. How many dreams die because of a lack of action? How many possibilities disappear because we're not in action? And we need to be able to get into action. Step 4 is turning the breakdowns into breakthroughs. You know, the first time we launched this trebuchet, the milk jug we were trying to launch went backwards. Did not go in the direction we anticipated. It took numerous times to figure out how to get the sling and the hook and all that stuff to launch so it would go forward. But every time there was a breakdown, the word we just joked about with this trebuchet was redesign, redesign. Let's turn this breakdown into a breakthrough. Now, one of the things that's going to be essential for a peak performer is they've got to have the skill to turn a breakdown into a breakthrough. I want to share with you a sad story, and I see this as a sad story. I was talking to a young musician. He's probably 21 years old. He mentions to me about the experience he had his senior year in high school. He had a bad performance with his cello. Now, this you could call clearly a breakdown. But he did not have the skill to turn a breakdown into a breakthrough. Consequently, this bad performance cost him any future career with his cello. He had already locked in a college scholarship. He was doing very well with his cello. But by not having the skill to turn a breakdown into a breakthrough, he gave up his cello. And he's telling me all this as tears roll down his cheeks. He gave up something that was important to him because he didn't have the tools and skill to turn breakdowns into breakthroughs. Incidentally, I happen to believe that the primary reason we fail to achieve the goals that we've set, I mean new goals, and each one of you have goals, high goals, specific goals. The primary reason we don't achieve those isn't because we don't know how to get our goals, or we don't know what to do, or it's not a good goal. It's we simply do not update our breakdown strategies. We do not update our breakdown strategies. If we're going to take on a new goal, we're going to play a new game, we have got to be willing to update our breakdown strategies. That's how we do turn a breakdown into a breakthrough. So this leads us to step 5. Evaluate. We've got to look at this and start saying, okay, what's working here? What's not? What is your next step? Now, each of you could look at where you're at today with your business, with your real estate goals, and you can find some things that are clearly working. It's a powerful thing to sit down and say, okay, what's working here? I'm going to make a list of what's working. Okay, what's not working? What's your next step? Imagine what would have happened to that young cello player if he, at the end of his performance, could have said, okay, what's working? Well, I was prepared. I went here. This didn't work. Okay, that didn't work. What's my next step? I don't think he would have decided that his next step was to give up his cello, to give up his dream, to give up that passion. So to be able to step back and say, okay, there's going to be things that are working. There's things that aren't working. What is your next step? Now, as you look at the next step, that's a powerful thing to start getting in action about, seeing possibilities around, turning the breakdowns into breakthroughs. So when I look at this trebuchet story with my son, what do I see? Is I see a possibility that he was willing to go after. I saw a commitment to that. I saw action, lots of action, action that was beyond what I thought could ever happen. I saw breakdowns turned into breakthroughs. We laughed so hard when we watched that crossbeam turn into a V. We just laughed. Okay, we reevaluated. We figured out what we needed to do. We tried another route. This time we got the same piece or a different piece of pipe, piece of rebar in it. Okay, that took care of it. Now we're moving forward. Now, as we look at this, one of the most important things for you to be able to do is recognize this question here. If your attitude and your actions stay as they are, what can you expect to see 1 month, 1 year, 5 years, or 10 years from now? Now, the answer to this question is just incredibly simple. The same thing. So as we spend the rest of the time talking here in this webinar, and as you have a chance to ask questions and type them in, those kinds of things, I want you to keep thinking to yourself, okay, right now, how would you describe your attitude? Right now, how would you describe the actions that you're taking? Are these the kinds of attitudes and actions that are going to bring you what it is you want, to bring you what it is that you want to create and be a part of? Now, this is where we're going to have some fun with this. Answer this question here. What attitude or ways of being would cause or support the achievement of your goals? And write down on a piece of paper 3 what I'm calling positive trigger words. I had a lot of fun with this project. I've been teaching a class at Brigham Young University on the psychology of music performance. And I wanted to test out and do some research with some of the techniques that I like to use. I like to use a tool called positive trigger words. Let me tell you a little bit about the research design. I took 90 students from a college choir. This was a non-audition choir. And I had all 90 students go into rooms individually with the instructions to sing "Row, Row, Row Your Boat" as musically as they could. Well, as they left the room, they either went back to choir or into a 50-minute psychological intervention. Well, my intervention was about trigger words. My intervention said, think of the words confident, bold, and dynamic. So I had each student write on a name tag the words confident, bold, and dynamic and stick it on their shoulder. Call these positive trigger words. Well, 1 hour later, I had all 90 students go back into the room with the video camera with the same instructions. Please sing "Row, Row, Row Your Boat" as musically as you can. Well, we are very excited because the difference was obvious. The group that had my intervention, they didn't sing "Row, Row, Row Your Boat" like they did the first time. They sang it with a level of confidence and boldness and expression that was just not there with the control group. Now, of course, we had independent raters on this and little assessments and all that stuff, and we've just sent this research study off for publication. Because what this little research study proved is this 50-minute intervention created a whole new level of musical expression. And I've seen this work with business people, sales reps, whatever your goal is. It's helping you become aware of your positive trigger words. One of my fun stories was with a salesman as we were talking about this, because he didn't have any positive trigger words. So my next slide here, again, so make sure you've got 3 words written down that would describe the attitude that you know if you are in this attitude, it is supporting, it is causing, it is pushing you toward your goal. Consider not only are there positive trigger words, but there are also negative trigger words. Words that if we're thinking, words that if we're feeling, we just go right to a negative place. I was working with a guy. He shows up in my office, and I start talking to him about this strategy. And when we looked at his negative trigger words, well, let's just say he had one, and it was simply loser. He pretty much felt like a loser. He just got kicked out of the apartment and broke up with his girlfriend. He was living in his parents' basement, driving his dad's beater car. He was a salesman. He was the lowest paid salesman in his company. And when we looked at this whole question of what his attitude was right now, it was, I am a loser. Well, he had lots of evidence in his world that he was a loser. He was selling blinds, and he was probably averaging about $2,000 worth of sales a week, which wasn't a lot when you start considering percentage. More evidence for being a loser. Well, I asked him a question. I said, give me 3 words that you would use to describe the top salesman in your company. And he thought for a moment and came up with, in a sense, 3 positive trigger words. He looked at that man and goes, okay, he is courageous. He is organized. He is confident. Well, he took on a new game to play. He took on recognizing the negative trigger words and the power of feeling and thinking like he was a loser. And much like the musicians in my study, when he caught himself thinking the negative trigger words, he took a breath and just repeated the positive trigger words. Before we really got into this technique, he actually shared a story with me where he saw a contractor that could use the blinds that he was selling. He got so triggered in a negative way that he walked away from that contractor. A couple months later, he saw that same contractor again, and his first thought was, I'm a loser, he's a winner, walk away. But he caught himself. He took a breath. He let go of the negative words, the negative stuff in his head. He repeated, confident, courageous, organized, those positive trigger words. He moved forward. He moved through that. And as he moved through that, he turned this guy into a sale. About 4 months later, I'm talking to him, and he just let me know, he goes, John, I just want you to know that I sold $20,000 worth of product last week.
Wow.
He took a huge step up. And it was simply by him becoming aware of what was triggering him and the power of certain words. Now, to do this, we've got to understand the machinery of the brain. To really get clear on this and to really turn this into something powerful, we've got to consider our brain is like a machine. And do we know how to use this machine? Do we understand this machine? Can we optimize this machine? There's 2 parts of the brain here that we're going to be talking about specifically. If you were to tap on your forehead, underneath your forehead is brain matter. It's referred to as the frontal cortex. It's approximately about the size of your fist. Consider that this I like to call your creative brain. It's your frontal cortex. And this is the part of the brain this is our powerful brain. I mean, this is creative. We go through options. We solve problems. We see possibilities. And we make choices. When my son was deciding what his history project was going to be, his frontal cortex was fully activated, exploring all kinds of options. And through that process, he was able to make a choice. This is going to be it. I'm going to do a trebuchet. This is what I want. Now, there's another part of our brain that's also very, very important to understand. It's part of the machinery of how our brain works. And this part of the brain I like to refer to as your survival or habit brain. It's a little tiny structure, actually 2 little tiny structures in the center of the brain. It's called the amygdala. And they're more like the size of a fingernail. Now, this part of the brain is responsible for your survival. It's important. You want to use this part of the brain to make sure that you're going to be safe. I was down in Zion National Park a couple summers ago. Beautiful place in southern Utah if you haven't been there. I'm enjoying this incredible vista, towering red rock canyons. I'm walking down this trail. I take a step, and suddenly I hear a little tick-tick-tick-tick-tick-tick. Well, at that instant, that sound of the rattlesnake has been programmed in my brain more than once. It's a danger, and I had an automatic reaction. Now, in this situation, I jumped automatically backwards. Why? I've learned that sound means danger. I don't want to get any closer. I was not in charge of that response. It was not a response of stopping and going, gee, guys, does that sound like a rattlesnake to you? Do you think I'm in danger? I'm not sure how close I am. You think I'm in danger? No, there was a complete change from top to bottom. I was no longer in the freely enjoying, creative part of my brain, frontal cortex. I was now into the fight or flight or freeze part of the brain. It's interesting, when we get triggered, everything changes. But the question here is, what have we been programmed about? What have we been taught? Now, see, I grew up here in Utah, and I have encountered probably a half dozen rattlesnakes through all my adventures out and about. And, you know, every single time, I've never considered doing anything other than running away, jumping back, getting to safety. I actually, as a psychologist, I have a plastic rattlesnake that looks very real. I use it as kind of a metaphor. I was talking to somebody about this, and I threw this rattlesnake on the floor, and I was telling my whole story about, you know, running away from the rattlesnake down in Zion National Park. And for the first time, as I've shared this with somebody, I could tell he was not in agreement with run away. I could just get his facial expression. Most people are like nodding with me, oh yeah, run away, I'd do it too, I've done that. And he had this kind of wry smile on his face. I stopped my story and I said, so what are you thinking? And he looks at me and he goes, capture or destroy. I thought, whoa, never heard that before. Well, just as quickly as he said that, one little piece of history that he shared with me earlier, like just flashed. This man spent 16 years active duty Green Beret. See, his mechanism to deal with, quote, dangers had been trained in a very different way than mine had been trained.
Right.
You wouldn't want a Green Beret to run away, would you? It just doesn't make a lot of sense, you know. Mm-hmm. But see, what was interesting about that is where my training and my history said run away, his history, his training said capture or destroy. Now, if we take those two concepts and take them out of the militaristic terms, what does it mean to capture something? It's to make it yours, to turn what's out there into something that you can benefit by, or just get it out of your way so it's not slowing you down. And it's important to be able to, it's important to be able to recognize that you need to be able to do that. So as we look at this, let's go on to the next little slide here, because I want you to recognize that when you get triggered, something does change. Heart rate increases, muscle tension increases, respiration increases, cold clammy hands, dry mouth, stomach distress. Now the stomach distress it can be as simple as kind of the butterflies of the stomach kind of thing, or it can also be more like a nausea kind of thing. But when we get triggered, we go into a state of fight or flight here, and our body is now preparing for danger, and it wants to either attack or run. Now, if you think about calling somebody, I'll bet you more than one of your audience members, Tim, have experienced these same symptoms either before or after or during some kind of conversation or deal about real estate.
Right.
Suddenly it's like, wait a minute, what's going on here? What's happening? And to learn how to manage this and to understand it, it's interesting. One of the things I like to teach performing artists is the idea that your body is a machine, and that when this system gets activated, it's going to do what it's programmed to do. We may not be in charge of whether or not it gets activated, because if that's programmed in there, that's pretty tough to completely eradicate. But once it's activated, we can do something with this. And we can learn how to manage it and calm down. So the heart rate and the muscle tension and the rapid breathing and all the stress that we're feeling. This is often referred to as the stress response. Now this is actually a very important thing to understand, because in your lifetime, somewhere between 50 to 90% of your trips to your primary care physician will be caused by the activation of the stress response. It's not a healthy thing. It does not promote healthy living. It does not promote productivity. So we need to be aware of when this is on and how we can actually manage this. So it's important to recognize this stress response really has two parts to it. It has the physiology that changes. Boy, the body from head to toe is pumped with neurochemicals. But then we go into the emotional, cognitive symptoms. Our attention focus narrows. Our thinking gets distorted. We're really self-conscious. There's a sense of concern or worry. We're reactive about things. Sometimes we're confused about what to do. Now, the attention focus narrowing is really a life-saving kind of strategy. Again, consider that you're on the edge of the Grand Canyon. You're totally in this rapture of how grand the canyon is. And somebody says, look out, there's a rattlesnake. Where's your attention going to go? Right to that danger. Tim, I'll bet you as you work with your students, you see them start to focus on what they perceive to be the dangers.
Right.
They get locked in on those dangers, and from your perspective, you're going, okay, I can see your point of view, but you're missing the rest of the story here. But yet they stay stuck and locked in on that danger.
Right.
And so when we start to recognize that this is part of a biological function and the machine is doing its job, we've got to figure out ways to broaden it out. Now, you'll appreciate this next frame here, because we're looking at this idea that when we get triggered in the emotional symptoms, we end up with distorted thinking. We're self-conscious, we're worrying, we're reacting to things. All this stuff is going on. We're not going to be in a peak performance state. And I like to refer to this as monkey chatter. Now, I'm borrowing the term monkey chatter from a Buddhist term, actually. And it's really about all the crazy things that just fire off in our head when we get triggered by something. Stuff just fires off, chattering. Now, as I found this picture, there's two things I really liked about it. One, I wouldn't want to get very close to that particular monkey. I mean, I'm looking at those teeth and that mouth and just the intensity of that. I'm also looking at, he's holding on to some bars. He's caged. I'll often work with young kids and adolescents who've got school anxiety. And with one young lady, real young girl, I came up with the phrase, and I'm talking about monkey chatter, is monkeys belong in the zoo and you belong in school. Now, this has a particular impact for us as professionals in whatever we're doing, because see, when our monkey chatter starts to fire off, and we're hearing about all those things, oh, you can't do that, you're stupid, and this is not good enough, and that's wrong, and you don't know what you're doing, and why are you doing that, this isn't going to work, and just fires off. It's like the monkeys put us behind the bars. And they're yelling at us, telling us we can't leave, we can't go past this, you're trapped here, see, you can't do that. And what we need to be able to do as professionals is start to recognize when our own monkey chatter starts to say, hey, I can't do this. Say, wait a minute, this is monkey chatter. This is old stuff. My negative triggers are flying around all over the place. And I've got to get them out of my space. Otherwise, they're controlling me. I'm the one behind the bars that say I can't go there. I'm the one behind the bars that say, oh, I don't have enough of what it takes. I can't make that happen. And so one of the most important things we've got to be able to do is figure out how to quiet the monkeys. And when you can start to recognize that those monkeys are actually chattering as part of our programming and part of our history and part of what we've learned before, much like the sales example I shared earlier, his monkey chatter simply said, you're a loser, and he was acting like a loser. He had lots of evidence that he was a loser. But when he took that on as a function of his automatic nature of the brain, see, it makes sense to have the little rattle of the rattlesnake programmed into the brain, saying this is dangerous. But what about the word failure? What about embarrassment? What about disappointment? What about fear? Well, all those words have meaning to us as well. I've talked to more than one professional who the fear of failing becomes such a powerful thing that they're only doing what is absolutely safe. Well, in that sense, they're not moving forward. And it's because their monkey chatter says, don't fail, don't fail. I was talking with a friend of mine, very successful entrepreneur, and the conversation was a little bit different. And he goes, John, I'm not failing enough. Now, he has a different perspective or understanding about this, because his monkey chatter doesn't say that failure is bad. I mean, he takes very calculated risks. He's very intentional with what he's doing. But he knows what he's doing also involves a risk of failure. But he also knows unless he's doing things, growing, reaching, experiencing breakdowns, he will not be experiencing breakthroughs. So he's tamed that monkey chatter that says failure is bad, and in him, that's something that works, and he moves forward with it. So the monkey chatter here is just really kind of a fun thing to look at. What I've got here, I just want to take a couple minutes, and then we'll just open up for questions and just share different ideas from different questions people have here. I've got 3 interventions here that I want to talk about in terms of what are some things that you can do as a professional that's going to help you when you're recognizing you're getting triggered, when you're shifting from that creative, powerful frontal cortex into the fight or flight part of your brain. The first one there is to simply use the trigger words. So just take a breath and realize that you've got a negative trigger in your space. Take a breath, breathe in slowly. Say, let it go. Let go of that negative, oh, I can't do it, or I'm failed, or this is horrible, whatever it may be. Let that go, and then go back to what are those words that light you up? What are those words that can move you and shift you in your attitude? Okay, confident, bold, dynamic. Great, simple little intervention. I have what I call the 10-count breathing exercise as another intervention. This exercise is the beginning of meditation and relaxation strategies. Now, I would assume, maybe I'm mistaken here, but many of your listeners, many of the people here that are your students, Tim, have never had any real instruction about meditation, how to relax, how to calm the body. It's kind of like the body just does what it does, and when you're full of anxiety, that's what it's doing. Okay, how do you calm it down? I like to use the word activated. And, imagine how this scenario would work for you. I'm teaching my class, the Psychology of Music Performance. I've just gone through and explained all of the anxiety structure, what's going on in the brain, what part of the brain, what are the symptoms. And I've done some instruction, too, about how to quiet some monkey chatter. And then I mentioned to my students that I'm going to give them 20 minutes. And I'm going to dismiss the class, and I want them to go out on campus. I want them to come back after they've had 3 performances. I didn't care what they did. If they sang a song, told a joke, tap danced, broke out their instrument, didn't really matter. I said, go up to a stranger, introduce yourself as a member of my performance psychology class, ask if that you can perform for them, and ask for feedback. Well, just as I start to explain this, I watch the class become overcome with fear. I mean, I can see the activation going on in all the students as I'm talking about this. Just imagine if you were asked to do the same thing. Well, I loved it when one student raised his hand in the back of the class, and all he could say was, I'm activated. He was aware the machinery was on. The question is, what do you do about it? This is how this 10-count breathing exercise goes. It starts with you declaring out loud, body, it's safe, it's time to relax. So those are your words. That's your frontal cortex saying it's time to relax, it's safe. That means you're present to your surroundings and you're giving your brain the directions that you want to give it. Whereas when you're triggered, your habit and history just takes over. So the 10-count breathing exercise, again, starts with body, it's safe, it's time to relax. And then as you inhale very gently, you bring your hands into a fist, squeeze them tight as you inhale. And as you exhale, you say out loud, body, relax. Now, you do that 10 times, like body, relax 1. Breathe in, squeeze the hands, body, relax 2. Just by doing that 10 times, and by practicing it, you are now training your body to deal with that sense of activation. Now, if there's a true bona fide danger in place, great, it's going to help you. But trying to plan a real estate deal and you're overcome with anxiety, That's not going to help you at that point. So again, just by saying, body, it's safe, it's time to relax, breathe the hands in, squeeze them, let it go, you're teaching your body that it's safe to deactivate. And the more you do that, the more effective it will be. In this class I teach, I require my students to have 50 relaxation sessions. I want them to master this skill of deactivation. And it's really quite amazing once you've gotten to the point where you've done like 50 relaxation sessions. Shortly I'm going to have some video clips up on my website that describes this 10-count breathing exercise, as well as some other exercises that you can do. You can also find others on Google and places like that. Google relaxation techniques, and suddenly you're going to have a whole bunch of information about how to deactivate the body. Because as you can deactivate the body, you get to refocus your mind. And this is really a powerful thing. Because until we can deactivate the body, it's almost impossible to quiet the monkeys that are just chattering in our head.
Right. It sounds like a good, cool exercise for people who have anger issues.
It's a great anger issue because that anger is coming from that fight or flight part of the brain. And to be able to just step back and say, wait a minute, I want to calm down. It's interesting, when you start talking about peak performance, you hear so much about the zone, don't you? Mm-hmm. If you've watched sporting events, they talk about, Tiger Woods was in the zone, or this athlete was in the zone. Well, that zone actually correlates with your frontal cortex. A person is fully present, they're aware of what they need to be aware of, they're taking the steps and the actions that they've planned and learned, and they're in the flow of that. But when we get triggered and something takes us out of that, we go out of the zone, so to speak, and we're either going to go into fight and attack, which is the anger side, or to the avoid, the minimize, the run away. It's interesting, as all your students, if they were to look at their history with you and what they're trying to learn, I'll bet you they could find something they got really mad about, it didn't work the way they wanted to, or they could find something that they're simply right now avoiding. That'd be an interesting question to see if anybody would agree with that, in just terms of, can you identify right now are things that, okay, this part of my real estate business and what I'm working on, I'm in the zone with this part. I'm really moving forward here. It's flowing. That part I'm just upset, resentful about, or that part I'm just avoiding. Mm-hmm. I'll bet you that you could find some people that could relate to that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So, the idea here is to start to recognize when we're out of the zone, when we're in that little part of the brain the size of a fingernail, we want to be able to shift. We want to be able to say, wait a minute, I'm not going to be productive here. One of my favorite strategies to really help people break out of the fight or flight center of the brain is a one-sentence question. What am I going to create with this? See, that statement alone requires the frontal cortex to activate, because that's the part of the brain that relates to creativity. So they've just had a deal fall through. What am I going to create with this? Are they going to create a lot more negativity, fall back into the negative trigger words, fall back into the anxiety? Or are they going to figure out a plan to move through this? And again, that simple question right there, what am I going to create with this, fully activates that frontal cortex. Now, I have one more word up here called centering. Now, this is a very simple exercise. It's a combination, really, of the 10-count breathing exercise and the trigger words. But it's just to find yourself in a sitting or standing position, breathing in very gently, and thinking to yourself, balance, center. And then as you continue to breathe in, you think of those positive trigger words. And then you take that step forward, whether it would be to make that phone call to that person that you're avoiding, whether it is to face the reality of what is in this letter that you're holding. But again, it's just a very specific way of saying, I'm going to take a breath, I'm going to think about this, I'm going to move forward. Now, the question of quieting the monkeys, as I've got that listed here, that's a whole other discussion in a lot of different ways. But the most important part about this for right now is to recognize that the chatter in your head is coming out of your history. It's coming out of past experiences. And it can also be automatic. And so to quiet that means you've got to really look at it as for what it is. Let me share with you a great story about a monkey that had been really loud for a good number of years for a young musician. This particular person, when she was 14, had been asked and was prepared for a solo in church. She was all ready to sing a solo in church. She had her best friend as her accompanist, and they were all excited and ready to enjoy this. Well, in the middle of the soloist is singing just fine. She's having a great experience here, when her accompanist has a breakdown, like stops playing completely. Well, this was a trigger. It activated their stress response. They didn't know quite what to do or how to cope with this. They looked at each other, kind of panicked, and simply scurried back into the benches and sat down. Well, see, at that moment, the experience of singing in public became programmed into that amygdala part of the brain as a danger. Now, she didn't necessarily think of it as dangerous, but she certainly felt it was embarrassing and horrible and just felt really bad about it. But again, she didn't have the tools or skills to process this. So it got stuck in her brain, so to speak. 6 years later, she's taking my performance psychology class. And I'm talking about some of these concepts, and she raised her hand and asked, "So is this why I quit singing?" And told that story. Well, she'd never considered that that was monkey chatter, that part of her history was just chattering away saying, "You can't sing, this is dangerous, don't do that." She had not sung in public in 6 years. She was working on a degree in piano performance. That's why she was taking my class. But she had not sung in public in 6 years. Well, just by her becoming aware of this, something major shifted for her. And the exciting part about this was 2 weeks later, class starts, she raised her hand and she goes, "Dr. Skidmore, I just want you to know, I sang a solo in church on Sunday." She quieted that monkey. She got past that monkey, and she was able to move forward in ways that she had not been able to before. Now, Tim, I've been talking a lot. I've shared lots of different ideas about things that I believe are very important for us to understand, whether it's looking at the machinery of how our brain and our body work together, sometimes for us, sometimes against us. As we start to look at what our hopes and what our dreams are, things that we want to be able to build and create in our lives, what breaks down, how do we cope with that? And so I just open it at this point to just kind of field some questions and just kind of go from there. What questions?
Sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So anybody who has and you know, thank you so much. By the way, this is awesome materials that you're teaching us here. Yeah, I don't know if the people on the call absorb it as much as you know what like you know how like we have different experiences and so we draw on different things to relate to the material that we're learning. And I mean some of these you know some of the tips that you gave out. Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm thinking, wow, this is really good. And so, like, I have, you know, I mean, I didn't write it down, but like in my mind, I actually have an action plan to implement some of these things because, you know, a lot of these things I have forgotten or have put aside and you know, not made it as a priority anymore. Especially this trigger words that you're talking about, and you know the 10 count breathing exercise. That's really good. So yeah, so now I actually have I mentally have an action plan in place that I'm gonna write down at the end of this call here. So yeah, I hope that the people that are listening in here was able to take away as much as I have, listening to you. So let's, we'll ask you who wants to ask questions, and we'll go from there.
Hey, Tim,
if you want, say that again.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, John. We talked this afternoon about some of the students that are trying to set up their network. They've got a real estate agent, a title company. They've got everything lined up, but the thing they don't have is that first telephone call. So, give an idea on how to get past that?
Absolutely. Let's talk about that first phone call. I mean, essentially, that is a performance, and you know that performance is an important performance. Now, it's not a whole lot different than the person going to Broadway, and they've got 60 seconds to shine. That's what they're setting their mindset around their performance. But when you look at this idea of a phone call, well, let's go back and say, okay, there's some ways that you can prepare and really get ready for this phone call. First off, do you know why you're making this phone call? Are you clear with that? Probably everybody in your network would say, well, of course, I need this person's services. They have a reason for doing that. Well, have they looked at the attitude they want to bring to this phone call? Are they in a space, are they in an attitude of confidence and being bold and being creative, confident, competent? Or are they worried, insecure, fearful? Well, this is where that trigger word exercise and the breathing exercise can be really helpful. It's like, okay, why am I so afraid of this phone call? This person's not going to bite me. This phone call is going to benefit them. It's going to benefit me. How can we find out what's possible here? And, some people are afraid of hearing no. Well, if we're afraid of hearing no, we're always looking for yeses. Yeses come with low-hanging fruit. It's like if we want to move forward, we got to be ready to, deal with no's. What do we make that mean? So there's lots of monkey chatter around that. Well, if we look at that as the foundation, the next step is, are they prepared for this phone call? Do they know their stuff? They've got the information, the numbers, the questions to ask this person. Have they done any background information to know a little bit about the person, about the organization they're trying to contact? In a sense, are they prepared for it? Well, the next step really is very simple. You take a breath, you do a centering exercise, you repeat your trigger words, you quiet those monkeys, and you make a phone call. You do it. You plan your action. You plan your work. You go after it. Well, once you do that, this really fits into the whole model of the Trebuchet story. Was there a breakdown? Was there success? What are you going to do with that? What worked? What didn't? Can you look at every experience that you have as a real estate investor as something to look at and learn from and to move forward with this? No one's going to start out at the top of the learning curve. One of my favorite metaphors that I use a lot in presentations is teaching a group of people how to juggle. I'll bring a half-dozen set of juggling balls with me. I'll get volunteers up in front of a room and say, let's juggle. Well, one of the things I like about that metaphor is people have to share what they know. They either know how to juggle or they don't. But how do they react to that? I asked a group one time, I did this, I had them come up in front of a group, I had them juggle. After they juggled for about 20 seconds, giving it their best shot, I said, so what kind of monkey chatter was going on? I loved it when one guy raised his hand and he simply goes, I'm a retard. Well, that doesn't apply in reality, but it's that monkey chatter. And so as people start to look at approaching a phone call, because, when you look at investing and you look at the power of real estate and the networking, it's about communicating with people. It's about talking to people. It's about finding how you can serve them, how they can serve you, how you can work together. Well, that communication is important. And to be able to just simply say, okay, I'm going to communicate. I'm going to reach out. I'm going to practice this. And to move forward with it. So the phone call you're talking about, Stan, really is a mini performance, isn't it?
Correct.
And, are these people ready for that performance? Are they mentally set for it? And are they willing to learn from it? Are they willing to take what they can from it and turn the breakdowns into breakthroughs? Are they willing to say, okay, if this didn't work, what could? Or are they willing to say, boy, I'm really glad I did that. I'm really glad I did that. Because suddenly a door got opened. that they wouldn't have had opened otherwise.
Right.
So the thing I would say about people who are really struggling with making those phone calls is to set a certain goal for phone calls per day. For 1 week, make 10 cold calls every day. For 1 week, make your list of who you want to contact and who you're avoiding, put at the top of the list, and tell somebody that if you don't make that call, you're going to buy them lunch tomorrow.
That's a good idea.
You know, I'm buying lunch tomorrow if I don't call Steve. And to basically practice accepting a no, practice accepting a yes, practice getting organized for this little performance on the telephone. What kinds of things do you need to have? What kinds of things are going to make a difference for you? And it's all about getting into action, making that action work. Because that's what it's all about. The more action they get into, the better it will be. Stan, unfortunately, what most people will readily agree with is the more we practice something, the better at it we get. And that proves with any skill that requires motor skill, knowledge, whatever we're doing. But the reality is we often practice running away. And suddenly we're getting better at avoiding. And as we start to avoid things, and those monkey chatters just says, run away, we're the one that ends up getting locked into the zoo because our world keeps getting smaller and smaller. But when we can quiet those monkeys and say, wait a minute, you guys belong in the zoo, you belong behind the bars, I want to be out here where I am free to go wherever I choose to go. And see, that's a skill to practice. It's a very important skill to practice. And
right.
we don't often think of it that way.
Right.
So if you're coaching someone, Stan or Tim, that's, you know, you can feel their anxiety about phone calls, give them a specific assignment about call 3 people every day for this week and just see how it goes.
Yeah, you know, it's funny how making phone calls is one of the things that people fear the most. And sometimes I have that, you know, fear, and I have that anxiety too, but almost, you know, it's like majority of the time, I probably say over 90% of the time, when I get off the call, it's like, wow, I'm so glad I made that call. You know, I'm so glad I asked that question. I'm so glad, you know, I connected with that person. And it's, I mean, and majority of the time, it turns out well. You know,
absolutely.
So, yeah. So get over it, and yeah, it'll do you a lot of good. That's for sure. Okay. Anyone else have questions? If you have questions, just raise your hand. Let me see here. I think some people might have typed in questions. Oh, okay. They've been typing in questions. Let me
see. Good.
Let me see here. Okay. Let me see. Right. Ron, I'm going to, let me see here. All right. Ron, if you want, I'll unmute you here, buddy, and you can ask the questions. Ron, are you there? Ron Nixon, do you have your mic on? You don't have a mic. All right, Ron. Well, you can call back in. Okay. Julio, I'm going to unmute you, buddy. Julio, you...
Yeah, I'm here.
Awesome. Do you have any questions for John? We can't hear you anymore. You need to adjust your mic.
Now, it's better?
Hello?
Hello? Now?
Yeah.
Is it better now?
A little bit.
It's better.
Well, just a personal comment means I recognize my English is not pretty good because my first language is not English. But today I made only 12 phone calls and I need to get 3 more to get at least somebody maybe to tell me yes. So when you say no, it's good because you are very close. It's the only thing I can say.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's often said, especially when we're trying to talk with people, the more no's we hear, the more yeses we're going to be hearing.
Right. That's
and
correct.
So in part, it's really quieting the chatter we have about what does it mean to hear a no, or in the case of language, quiet the chatter that says, I want to learn to communicate. I can communicate, or quiet that chatter that says you can't, and just proceed from the place of I've got something to share. I want to communicate with you. And most people are very willing when they get a sense of attitude of I want to communicate with you. They're very willing to follow through with that and communicate. Be more specific with your question. Is there something specific with your question that I could assist you with?
We can't hear you again, Julio. Julio.
Yes.
We can't hear you again. Yeah. Your mic's not working right. While he's adjusting his mic, Ron had a more specific question here. What is the spelling of that small middle part of the brain that handles the fight or the flight response?
Let's see if I've got that. It's called the amygdala, and I believe it's AMGDYL, amygdala, D-E-L-A, amygdala, or close to that. It's part of the limbic system in the brain. It's part of the brain that deals specifically with survival.
Okay, cool. All right, Ron, did you get that? Okay, let me see here. Okay. Anyone else have questions? Julio, did you fix your mic or? Oh, he's
okay.
muted now. Hello?
It's okay now?
Oh,
yeah,
okay, much
okay
better.
Now.
Yeah, I am muting myself. Okay, no problem.
Yeah. So did you have a specific question or a challenge that you wanted to?
Well, just for for the older coaching students, in your opinion, John, how many phone calls do you think everybody should make a day in order to get a yes from any kind of sellers, or landlord buyers, or team members?
Anytime I've talked with people that are involved in sales, I often hear their different market has some type of ratio. Whether, on average, if they contact 50 people, they might get 2 positive contacts. If they contact 100 or 10 or whatever it may be. So I don't really know what the ratio might be for your particular industry. But what I would suggest is how much time are you dedicating specifically to doing that? Because one of the things I think often happens is if phone calls are the things people fear, they start to avoid them, so they can find plenty of other things to do besides make phone calls. And whether these phone calls are designed to expand your network, or it's a cold call, or to provide services or inquire about services, I would recommend that you figure out what your personal goal is. And are you dedicating a specific amount of time every day for that goal?
Yes, I do.
How much time do you dedicate?
Well, right now for me, this is like a full-time job, and I need to get at least 20 phone calls a day, at least 20.
Mm-hmm.
And when I don't do that, what I do is just leaving any kind of voicemail over the phone and try to make the follow-up for the next day or whenever is possible.
One thing I heard about voicemail, again, it depends on who you're talking to. If you have a relationship with this person, voicemails are really good if you know this person. But I've just heard and seen myself that cold call voicemail almost means nothing to me. But if I know there's somebody I really want to talk to, I might, and I've done this before. I haven't left a voicemail message for 2 or 3 phone calls before I leave a voicemail. So I really want to try to get hold of them and talk to them personally. That might be one strategy you could try. The other thing too is, so you know that you're looking for 20 phone calls. Is that enough for you?
Well, if I can get more, for sure, I can do more.
Well, do you have a plan to do more?
Yes.
What's that plan?
30 a day.
30 a day.
Yes.
Okay, so if we look at this and go back to the story about the trebuchets, so, okay, if you want to get 30 phone calls a day, well, that 30 phone calls, you see a possibility. What's the possibility you see coming from those 30 phone calls?
Well, what I do is just get a phone number for the due deals come, what ThinkMate's software is, and then I just make phone call thinking like the chance I can talk to the sellers and get put it under the contract and something like that.
Okay.
If I can't talk to him directly, I'll leave a voicemail in order to talk, or maybe he can leave a voicemail and then I make the follow-up. And if I can't do that, I just send an email in order to say, I'm here, hello, I'm here, I can help you with your problem, I can buy your house.
One thing is, see, it sounds like you're doing a lot of the right kinds of things. And one of the things that rarely occurs when someone kind of evaluates an experience post-performance is to evaluate the attitude they're bringing with it. In general, when you're making these 20 to 30 calls a day, how would you describe your attitude as you're doing it?
Well, I am very enthusiastic, and I have to, and I will, and because I'm very determined to get at least one, what is called agreement or flex option a week at least, or more. And so the only way to convert phone calls to one agreement is making as many phone calls.
Right. Now, and you do have specific time dedicated to do this every day?
Yes, I do. I got from, I think from 8:20 a.m. until probably 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. And then I make the follow-up later on with emails or something like that.
How would you say your current plan is working for you?
Well, probably I'm very close. So far I have a property under the contract. But right now, because I'm working in another state, I just got some advices from Stan, and I need to work on it. So that's my commitment, and I will have to do that, and I will do it.
Okay. Who holds you accountable to your commitments?
Well, I could say first myself, and then these masters, ThinkMate and Stan Molding.
It's great to have that accountability, because that certainly makes a difference. It sounds to me like you're doing a lot of the great, the right kinds of things. Tim, do you have any suggestions for him?
Well, I mean, yeah, you're doing, you're doing fine, Julio. The suggestion I have for you is more real estate specific than
and that's fine.
Than just mindset stuff. But one of the things that you might want to consider doing is in the morning, before you start making your call, or even the night before you end your call, you might want to send out a bunch of emails, so that way during your day you have sellers calling you instead of you just making outbound calls, and it will increases your connection rate with the seller. So if they're calling you, the chance that you'll be able to actually talk to somebody is extremely higher than if you're making outbound calls and you don't know whether or not they're home. So, so you end up making less calls per day, but you'll be able to talk to actual people. You'll be able to talk to more people. Okay. So, definitely incorporate that into your strategy, and have a goal to talk to X number of people per day, and yeah.
Okay. So. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
All Awesome. Anyone else got questions?
Okay, so I have another question.
Great, Stan.
So John, I'm showing a house on Sunday, and this happens more times than I would like to mention.
Mm-hmm.
People show up late, and they get in there, they pick the house to death. They cannot get a loan, so I'm not sure why they're picking it so hard, but by the time they leave, I'm ready to take a bat and smack them in the knees. Now, how do I get past that and get to the point where I'm ready to sell them something?
Well, what you're describing is you're allowing your monkey chatter, you're allowing your emotions to drive your thinking, and you're recognizing your body's getting all charged up. When you think about actually, whacking a client in the knee, that's really bad for your future business. And the attitude that starts to come with those kinds of thoughts and feelings really say you're missing what's going on in their world. They've got concerns, they've got issues, and if you start to go to a place of frustration and resentment and irritation about what's going on for them, you're missing their concerns.
Okay.
And so one of the things I would suggest in that situation specifically is, are you really listening to their concerns? Now, this might be nitpicky stuff and you're getting real annoyed, but these are valid concerns for them.
Right.
And then to recognize if you're getting charged and activated, it's not going to help you or your sale. And
Right.
so to just basically start to go, okay, let it go, let that fear go, let that resentment go, let that anger go. What's triggering you in this situation? Because as you can start to do that, you get to stay present. See, the frontal cortex of our brain is the creative part of the brain, and it only deals with now. It's like, what are we doing right now? How are we managing things right now? And when you start to get irritated and frustrated, you've already planned, oh, this isn't going to work. They're just being idiots. Can't they get this? What's wrong with this? That pulls you out of what their concerns and what their issues are right now. And it pulls you into more of a resentment, fight, anger, frustration place. And unfortunately with real estate, that's part of the nature of the game. There's a lot of people that don't just sign the dotted line real quick the way you'd like them to. And to recognize that this may be one of those that if it goes, it goes, but you're trying to bring your best and your creative brain, that frontal cortex, to answer their questions, solve their problems. And again, this is where I like that phrase of, what do you want to create with this situation? Because if you want to create more frustration and resentment, you can do that. And you're the one paying the price for that. Because it's stressing you out. But if you can step back and say, okay, right now, I want to just deal with this. Is this going to work? What's the next step? What's the creative process here? How do I manage this? How do I manage my emotions? It's kind of like, how do you get yourself back into the zone? And it might be just recognizing you're getting all charged up and angry and frustrated. Okay, how are you going to let that go? How do you clear your own space so you can be attentive to what's possible? It's kind of like bringing a negative attitude to a game or to a program. You don't want that. Negative attitudes are very infectious. And so I would really step back and say, okay, wait a minute. You've got some kind of monkey chatter going on that's causing this anxiety or this frustration for you. If you're listening to that, you're not going to be listening to your customer, your client. So in that sense, you're going to miss out on some opportunities.
Right.
Got it.
All right. Any other questions, anybody?
Richard's got one in here, Tim.
Hey, Judith, let me unmute her. Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
we can hear you.
This is very interesting. A couple of questions. One, let's see, what did you say that your friend said when you told him the story about seeing the rattlesnake and you expected a reaction and he gave you a different reaction? What exactly did he say again?
He said capture or destroy.
Okay, capture or destroy. Capture or destroy. Okay, and let's see, what do we do when, say, we have so much concern or compassion for the person and their challenges that we end up doing more for them than for ourselves. Like I've been a landlord, I was a landlord, and I did such a great job on the property, and that I ended up losing money. I still was able to sell the property for significantly higher than the market value, but I still lost money. But I was so concerned about other people that and that's a concern, just hearing about people's challenges, about how to get out from under their mortgage or all of their debts, and how do I objectify my thinking so that I'm thinking about myself as much as them.
Okay.
So that I make a profit.
Let me see if I can give a couple ideas around this. Because on one, I hear your compassion and your concern for other people. And at the same time, you're recognizing when that compassion turns into a problem for you,
yes,
it may not really be a problem. You're also creating a problem for them. One of the first things I'd have you look at is what kind of partnership agreement or what kind of agreement do you really have in place? Now, think of this in terms of the landlord and the renter. You start out with an agreement, and if they're supposed to pay you $800 a month, well, that's what they entered into, that's what you entered into, and originally it's working for both of you, or you wouldn't have signed the agreement. Well, if they start to say, well, I've only got $650, I've only got $500, okay, I don't have any money this month, that's an agreement, if you accept that really works for them, but it doesn't work for you. And so,
actually, I think I was good about getting the amount of money from them, but in terms of fixing the property, fixing things that were needed fixed, I ended up fixing so much that tenants couldn't pay for the fixes through their rents.
Boy, that sounds more like so if I heard that correctly, what you're saying is, okay, you can get your rent, but if they owe you $500 or $1,000 because of damages, is that where it breaks down?
Well, this is probably more detailed, but the property was rather run down when I bought it, and so as households moved out, I would fix up or rehab the apartments, and but I don't know, what are they called? The improvements needed to be amortized over a number of years, and I had made so many fixes that I needed to sell before the repairs got amortized, and I don't know, I'm just concerned about when I talk to people who are in a great deal of debt over their heads, and I will start resonating or feeling so much concern about them that I will want to help them out and not make the profit that I need to make to pay my bills.
Well, what I hear in that is a number of different things, but to me the main issue here is you've got to come up with an agreement that can work for you and for them. Okay. And the fact that they're having financial problems and they're way over their head means they're already having difficulty meeting their obligations. And by allowing that or letting them do that, it actually reinforces their irresponsibility.
Okay.
As a psychologist, I have a missed appointment fee. And one of the things I actually look forward to is a missed appointment. Because I know that if I process the missed appointment, they're going to learn a lot about how they manage their life and their world. And if you look at it much the same way, in that how you can help them be responsible is, one, hold them accountable to their agreements.
Okay.
And if they're willing to let you, learn or be aware of how they manage their finances, or if they want to help you and you're willing to do that, that may or may not be a role you want to get into. But one thing I know is that if you're willing to let them slide, they're willing to take the leeway. They're willing to take it. On the other hand, if you're willing to hold them accountable and say this is an agreement that can work for both of us, then you have a very different conversation, and you've got people that want to work with you because they know that they can trust you as well. And so, I mean, there's a lot to that question, but it really is, you know, if your compassion is driving everything, you may be breaking your own agreements, which means that's hurting you too. That doesn't work for you or for them. And those are really good places to talk to your coaches about and say, okay, why am I willing to let this slide? Or what do I do in this situation? Because, you know, the personal issues are showing up, and it's like, I got to balance this somewhere. And, you know, that's a good thing to talk to somebody through with something like that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome. Okay, we are about out of time, so we're not going to take any more questions here. But, you know, John, I want to thank you so much for being on this call and taking your valuable time and being so generous to share with everybody. Your teaching, what you have going on. So I want to make sure everybody knows how to get more of you, how to learn more from you, and get access to whatever you have to offer them. You want to go ahead and announce out what you have for them and your website and all of that good stuff?
Absolutely. First off, one of the best places to catch me would be at johnskidmore.com, and my webpage is geared toward performing artists. Now, there is a free performance profile, and just as a special offer to any of you that are through Tim's network here, if you'll download that free performance profile, you can fill it out wherever it refers to performing arts or to music. Just think of it in terms of your specialty or your skill that you're wanting to look at. And I would be more than willing, it looks like we've got about 24 people here, I would love to be able to correspond with you on a couple questions about that. So email me questions you might have. In a sense, if you download that performance profile, email me with some of the questions that you learned from that, and I'd love to correspond with you about that and just answer some of your questions about that performance profile. Also, in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to have a series of video clips. For example, that 10-count breathing exercise, I have on a little video about how to do that. I'll also have some other stuff about relaxation and some different skills and tools that, though it may be directed specifically at a performing artist, you are all performers. And so there'll be some video instruction that's going to be showing up on my webpage in the next couple of weeks. Another thing that I have that I think is very interesting here is I'm offering a performance analysis. And this is actually a 5-part performance assessment. I look at attitudes, beliefs, experiences, history. I look at your goals, and I get to bring my knowledge as a coach, psychologist to this experience. It's really valuable in recognizing areas where you're stuck in. One of the things this performance assessment does is I will be able to identify what are the top 3 attitudes or beliefs that are getting in your way. The achievement of goals is all about action and attitude. And when the attitude shifts, our actions just stop. And so this performance assessment is called a 5-part performance assessment. I do have a module, if you were to go through the products page, you would see where it talks about business entrepreneurship. And if you were to click on that, that's $147. That also includes a 50-minute consultation with me, going through this and looking at how that would relate to what is in your way and how do you break through that. Whether it's a question of getting stuck in some monkey chatter that's just, screaming, shutting you down, whether it's how do you break through your anxiety. But it's really all about looking at where are your performance strengths and weaknesses in regards to your business. What attitudes, what tools, what skills do you need from a psychological mental toughness perspective to help you turn those weaknesses into a strength. You've also got my phone number there. I'd welcome a conversation with any of you and start the communication, because my goal is to help each one of you step up, risk, and enjoy the process. One thing I loved about that whole trebuchet story, if I could duplicate the emotion and the feelings that my son and I experienced as we went through that, it was simply a blast. We were risking, we were stepping up, we were in action, we were having fun with this. And it turned into a great project, if you will.
Right.
So my goal as a performance coach is to really support each of you and to support everyone as performers to step up, risk, and enjoy the process, which sometimes not so easy to do. I know that myself, personal experience. But when we can, when we are, everything seems to work better. Tim, I want to thank you for having me on your show today.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you so much for your generosity of sharing these resources with everybody. So, hi, everybody. Again, thank you so much for being on this call. At 8 p.m. tonight, we actually have another webinar that's going on about how to beat the seasoning of title issues that the banks and FHA has now, and by tapping into the new money partner that I have found for you guys. So make sure you get on that call. It starts in about an hour and a half at 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. So make sure you get on that. Thank you, John, for being getting on and sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us and sharing your resources with us. And Stan, thank you for joining me, buddy.
Yeah, good time.
Just to hang out. So awesome. Okay, everybody. Well, thank you so much, and you have a good evening. Bye.
Thanks again. Thank you all so much. I look forward to talking with you. Take care.
Awesome. Bye-bye.